There's a reason why the judge in an American courtroom will have you place your right hand on the Bible and say, "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" And the reason that they ask that question is because it's so easy to use a portion of the truth that really presents a different story. It's easy to leave out a portion of the truth that tells an entirely different story. And it's also possible to tell something other than the truth, i.e., a lie. And because life is nuanced, meaning every aspect of life has a different way of looking at it, like facets in a diamond, it's easy to use that nuance, that partial truth, that would be truth, but it's not quite, nefariously. And that's what I want to talk about today on Leading Leaders. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I don't know if you've ever noticed it or not, but somebody can tell a partial truth. And what they're saying is actually true, but only to a certain extent. It's also partially true in that the rest of the story isn't known because they're only telling you a part of the truth. So for an example, if I took you to dinner and we went and ordered a giant supreme pizza, and you came home and mom said, "Did you eat your vegetables?" Well, a supreme pizza has tomatoes, and it has black olives, and it has bell peppers, and it has onions. And so you could say, yeah, we had vegetables. And that statement would not be untrue, but also would only be a partial truth. You follow what I'm saying? I think you do. I think you're smart enough to understand what I'm saying. Here's the question, though. When it comes to society and culture, whether you're talking about our justice system or our political system or our media system, and yes, media is a system with its own functioning ideologies and practices and behaviors and standard operating procedures, and while journalists compete for the attention, the eyeballs, and the ears of the audience, they also seem to have an agenda to which they're driving, not just exposing the news, but it seems, how many times have we seen over and over the media in all of its forms reproducing the same? In fact, it almost seems like they're scripted from one journalistic outlet to another. It's not like they've all written their own stories. They're all telling exactly the same story. In fact, if you've ever seen the little video where the tile pops up and they say, I think in the one that I've seen most commonly, "This is very dangerous for our democracy." And that exact quote covers the gamut of some 70 outlets of media, quote unquote, journalism. That's a system. It's a system like an assembly line. It produces something in the end, and the question you have to ask yourself is, what is it producing? See, when we talk about nuance, the ability to cover only one aspect, to say, yes, we had vegetables, we had black olives and bell peppers and onions and tomatoes, oh my, is not untrue. It's just not the whole truth. And it paints an intentionally nuanced picture of what's happening. It intentionally leaves out some details that might have caused you to make a different decision. Now, politicians have become very, very adept at the ability to say what they believe you want and need to hear, and to simultaneously leave out the things that, well, don't think they'll benefit them in the way that you vote, or the way that you donate, or the way that you behave in public, or the way that you act out, whether it's a protest or it's a failure to participate in the election process or the public debate. You know, if they feel like this doesn't really even need to go to vote, they'll wait till the end of the day before they put it in front of the Congress to make a decision on. Happens on a regular basis. We're going to ask for $40 billion to give away to another country, but we're not going to ask for it until everybody's ready to go home. In fact, some people have already gone home, and then we'll just get the vote that we want to, because we're playing to the room of who's actually in the room at the time that we Ask for the vote. Yeah. So it's nuance. It's the manipulation of the partial facts. It's looking at life through the multiple facets of a diamond and knowing that not every angle looks exactly the same. Leaders are aware that life is nuanced and that nuance can be used nefariously with impartial truths or intentional something other than truths, whatever you want to call those. But the reality is, as a leader, you better be very adept at reading not only the nuance itself, but the agenda behind the nuance and the other facets of the nuance. Because level upon level upon level, layer upon layer upon layer, these nuances have been manipulated into an augmented reality. Augmented reality. Nuance allows us to see subtle differences based on situations, based on circumstances. To be able to say that one person made that statement, or they may have said, "Get off my lawn." But it may have been a quote. They may have been quoting somebody else who said, "Get off my lawn." So to hold them responsible for saying, "Get off my lawn," when they don't even own a lawn, well, that could be a problem. And yet, when we see nuance used nefariously, that's exactly what happens. Quotes taken completely out of context. People arrested and detained for a nuance manipulated. We see leaders struggle with this all the time in small business. In small business, it might look like that one employee who comes to you first to tell a portion of a story, a part of a story, their facet of the story, their aspect of the story, knowing that if you saw the whole story in its full light, you wouldn't have the same reaction as you will if they tell you their part of the story first. I watch it often. In fact, it happened to me the other night. In a dining experience, we had asked for something at the table, and we were told no, it couldn't be done. Truth is, all it required was a manager to type in their little code, but we were told it can't be done. Can't be, it's not possible. And so I asked the server who told me it's not possible to have a manager stop by the table. As if I was blind and could not see, the staff person didn't go to the manager and say, "Table so-and-so would like to see you." The staff person went to the manager, pled his entire case out. I saw them explaining in body gestures and body language and hand talking and the whole thing. And by the time he was done, the manager was like, "Oh my gosh." And then came back to the server came back to the table. The manager never did. The server came back to the table and said, "I think I might be able to find a workaround, but only because this is really complicated, but I think I can make it work. So tell me what you want." Then walked off without taking the rest of the order. Just that one thing that we'd already argued about, that he didn't ask the manager to come by the table. See, that's the way of manipulating the nuance. He didn't want the manager to know how rude he has been about everything else at the table. He didn't want the manager to know how incompetent he'd been about everything else at the table. But every time he visited the table, he left out something, forgot something, moved on his merry little way as if we weren't even there many, many, many times. It was just kind of his nature. Here's the irony, though. When I finally did get the attention of a regular server that normally served us when we went to that building, and I asked her, what's going on with this? Is the manager not willing to come by the table? She's like, "The manager was never told to come by the table." I said, "Oh." And when the manager did come by the table, she sat down, we had a nice conversation, and she said to me, "I get complaints about that individual just like that almost every time they work." I'm thinking to myself, if you're the manager, if you're the leader, and you understand how they're manipulating the nuance of the circumstance on a regular basis, and they're telling you different things about their customer in order to manipulate the circumstance to their own favor, you have an employee with an integrity problem. Now, I don't care what your business is. It's not just table servers who do the same thing. It may be pest control. It may be house construction. It may be movers. It may be your auto mechanic. It may be your lawn care people. It could be anybody. I don't care what industry you're in. If you have employees who work for you, they also understand, maybe even naively, but they understand nuance. They understand that if I tell you part of the truth, if I tell you only from my perspective, if I share the truth as it is only from my angle, then I have an advantage. I have the advantage of the perception that you only know what I told you. Good leaders never settle there. Good leaders continue to do the homework. They understand life is nuanced, and nuance can be used nefariously. They understand that life can be seen from multiple perspectives, also from multiple facets, like a diamond. The light shines from different angles, and every time it does, it refracts the light differently. As a good leader, you're going to take the time to do the homework. You're not only going to ask the questions of the person presenting you, well, is there a chance that your perception is skewed a little bit? Is there a chance that your perception is, well, favoring you and you alone? Is there a chance that your perception is a confirmation bias, that you only know what already suits your opinion because, well, that's a decision you've already made? A good leader is going to dig into those questions and ask them with sincerity, looking for answers and integrity. A lazy leader accepts the truth as it's presented. I really need you to hear that phrase. A lazy leader accepts the truth as it's presented. Not the truth in all of its fullness, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, but the truth as it's presented. Nuanced, manipulated. Nuance, used nefariously. Nuance as a way of saying, well, you don't really understand the whole thing. Now, I know that there was a quote, and I'm not even going to get into who or by when, but as I'm thinking through this concept of nuance, I remember a quote that was used for almost 3 years to batter the ideas of an individual, even to beat down the reputation of this individual, because the quote that they used, if you take the quote out of the context of the purpose of the quote itself was just straight up obnoxious. What was said was foul. Not profane necessarily, but it was the kind of thought that you would look at yourself, and if you said it yourself, you'd be like, why would I even think like that? But see, the purpose of the quote wasn't about the quote. The purpose of the quote was exactly what I'm talking about today. The fact that there are those who live in that nefarious use of the nuance to such a degree that their confirmation bias allows them to hear what they want to hear from the person who said it. And if they said, we had vegetables for lunch, their immediate response would be, oh my gosh, they're lying. They went to Pizza Hut. There are no vegetables at Pizza Hut. That's how extreme their reaction would be to a truth told in part. And then there are others who would say, in hearing the same report, we had vegetables for lunch. Well, I don't care if they went to Pizza Hut. If they said they had vegetables, they probably had the best vegetables ever. They had more vegetables than you could have ever had anywhere else in the world. You couldn't go to Super Salad and have more vegetables than they had. Because they said they had vegetables, that's all there is to it. You see how that nuance, married together with confirmation bias, can lead you to believe and behave in ways that are far, far separate from actual truth. That's what polarization does in communication. That's what polarization does in societies and cultures. And the media has been very busy about the business of polarization, at least for the last decade, doing a very good job of sorting people by the use of nuance into categories where they can very quickly say, well, if I say this, this group's going to say that. And if I say the same thing to this group, they're going to think that. And if I can drive a deeper wedge between them, then I can get them fighting each other. And as long as they're fighting each other, they're not paying any attention to what I'm doing. You know, if you've ever watched two cats fighting, somebody trying to break up two cats fighting, if you throw cold water on them, most of the time, 90% of the time, they will run in opposite directions. Not because the fight is over, not because the problem has been solved, but because suddenly it appears they have a bigger enemy than they had to begin with. You're no longer my problem. It's not me and this other cat. It's me and whoever's got the water bucket, and I don't like it. Sometimes it takes a hose instead of a bucket. But most of the time, when they feel like there's an outside threat larger than themselves, they will turn together or turn tail and run. They will leave that problem. It's the person who has some other agenda, who is served well by the nuanced use of manipulation, to use the nuance, to manipulate the truth, to hide the actual truth behind portions of the truth and, well, things that are not truth, in order to cause divisions so that you're busy, distracted, and not focused on what you're supposed to be doing. It happens in every level of organization. It happens in families. It happens in small companies. It happens in large companies. It happens in geopolitical problems as well. Wag the dog. Don't watch this hand. The closer you look, the less you see. It's an all nuance. And it's nuance used nefariously. Good leaders learn to suss that out, to be suspect of every manipulation of nuance and ask the genuine, hard questions and demand integrity for their answers. Life is nuanced, but nuance can be used nefariously. Be alert. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, or Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.